Okay, welcome class. This is our first video for our macroeconomics class. This is, as probably you've guessed, this is just a temporary classroom. I will be broadcasting from another location for the rest of the semester, but I wanted to get you folks started. First of all, welcome to macroeconomics. Macro econ. It is the big picture, the study of the overall economy, gross domestic product, inflation, unemployment, all the major topics that affect the overall economy, as opposed to microeconomics, which is also offered at Macomb, which is the study particularly of individuals or individual firms and the decisions that they make, okay? But there's a lot that overlaps for both macro and micro. You can't separate them totally. A lot of the concepts are the same. All right. So, as we start out in your textbook, it says that there are five foundations for economics: incentives, trade-offs, opportunity costs, marginal analysis, and that trade creates value. Now, interestingly enough, depending on what economic books you use, some books claim there are 12 principles of economics. Ours says there's 5. The main thing to remember is this is economics, and some things can change. It's not etched in stone. A lot of times we'll say this is a law of, for instance, the law of demand, and then we have to condition it, saying, yes, well, if this happens, and this happens, and this happens. In our textbook, which is actually a pretty good textbook, they give us 5. Okay, so they're concentrating on 5 areas, and that's fine. But what we have to remember, and this is probably going to be your first discussion question, is that all economics, no matter how far you go in economics, from beginning, intermediate economics, advanced, even postdoctoral studies, all economics starts with the concept of scarcity. Everything in your life, my life, everything is in limited supply, all right? We do not have unlimited resources. We don't have unlimited supplies of anything, right? Your time is limited. Your energy is limited. You made a decision to take this course, all right? You could be doing something else, but you made the right decision to take this course to further your education and get your degree, have a better career, and so on and so forth. Okay, but everything in our world is in limited supply. If it weren't in limited supply, you wouldn't need economics, all right? So we have everything is in limited supply, whether it's money, time, energy, effort, and what we like to say is in limited supply, facing a world typically of unlimited wants, all right? We want to make ourselves happier, okay? Now, that's the beginning of economics. It starts with scarcity, limited, everything is limited, facing a world of unlimited wants. What does this do? Well, since everything is limited, we are forced to make decisions. We have to decide. We have to say, okay, I'm going to do this with this amount of block of time, or with this amount of money, or whatever it is, I'm going to make a decision, okay? And let's be real generic about this. What are we trying to do when we make a decision? Well, honestly, you're just trying to make yourself pull as much happiness as you can get out of that decision. All right. Now, granted, some decisions are more important than others, but when you think about it, and you make a decision, whether it's to wear a blue shirt or a red shirt, you're just trying to make yourself as happy, pull as much happiness out of that decision as is possible. All right. So we're going on on the premise that we're all rational consumers. All right, so we are forced to make decisions. And what does that mean? Well, decide, the word decide comes from the ancient Greek meaning to cut off, all right? And when we decide, what are we cutting off? Well, we're cutting off all the other options that we were thinking about doing, all right? All of you right now could be doing something else, but you cut off all those options to spend some time here watching these videos, taking this class, doing the discussion questions and so on and so forth. And so you gave up all the other options. That is opportunity cost, what I gave up. And we'll be looking at opportunity cost again and again. But basically, opportunity cost, what you gave up. If you had to put a hard number on it, you typically say, well, what was the value of your second best choice? And if push came to shove and they were saying, well, give me a number, what is your opportunity cost? It would be the value of your second best choice, okay? So we give up something, and our decisions are guided by, and I know they talk about this a lot in our textbook, incentives, all right? And incentives, it's something that causes us to take action, all right? It could be a positive incentive, meaning wants something that is encouraging us to do something, or a negative incentive, meaning we're not going to do something, or we will be cutting back. Okay? And governments use this all the time. They use incentives to affect our lives all the time. Case in point, when I was in college, when a lot of the students smoked cigarettes. Well, when you buy a pack of cigarettes, look at a pack of cigarettes today. You know, I don't smoke, but if you did, they're what, $7 or $8? Well, a huge amount of that money is a tax by the government, okay? And what are they trying to do? That is the government's way of giving us a negative incentive, not to smoke, okay? So incentives will guide or encourage our decisions to do something, okay? So we have decision making, which involve giving up something, guided by or encouraged by incentives, direct or indirect, and positive or negative, okay? Our example of direct or indirect would be price of gas going up, okay? Now, as we have seen lately, the price of gas has been going up. What will that, the direct effect would be, and you've already, and a lot of this you already know the answer to. You've been practicing economics your whole life. And quite honestly, this course, you'll be practicing economics for the rest of your life. So it's not a surprise when we start talking about some of these concepts that common sense will tell you, what the answer is. You already know what the answer is. Well, if the price of gas goes up, generally speaking, you're going to buy less gas. The quantity demanded will go down, which we'll talk about in just a minute. All right? That would be a direct cause or a direct result, a direct result of the price of gas going up. If the government slapped a big tax on gas, if they wanted us to drive more, we would. If they put a huge tax, even more than they do now, on gas, we would all drive less, okay? Now, is there a secondary or an indirect? Well, the indirect one would be, for instance, initially the direct result would be we drive less. However, if this continued on, perhaps we would be looking for more inexpensive ways to get around. Perhaps change to a car that's more fuel efficient, okay, or look at bicycles, sales of bicycles. So perhaps the indirect result would be sales of fuel efficient cars would go up, or bicycles would go up, something like that. That would be an indirect. So there are positive and negative incentives, and direct and indirect. Okay? Now, in this decision making, some are simple. They're either you do something or you don't do something. Okay? You folks, you made the decision, either you're going to come to Macomb and take college classes or you're not. You already made that. Either, that's called an either or decision. The other type of decision, the marginal ones, are a little bit more involved. That's what economics looks at a lot closer, because there's more to it, okay? Marginal, just like opportunity cost means what I gave up. Marginal just means doing one more, or consuming one more, producing one more, okay? So marginal decision making has to do with both production and consumption, okay? But it has to do with one more. Now, when we have that, choice or decision to make, whether it's either to consume one more or to produce one more, we receive a additional cost from that decision and an additional benefit, okay? So where do we stop? Where's the best place to be? Well, for instance, if we were, you're going out with your friends, you go to a restaurant and you, great pizza place, and you're really starving, you order that first piece of pizza, and the marginal benefit's way up here, okay? Marginal cost is relatively low, all right? You order you order one more, okay, because you're not starving, but you're still pretty hungry. Marginal benefit comes down a bit. We call that the law of diminishing marginal returns. And all that means is that as you're doing more of an activity, whether it's, again, consuming or producing, you're getting less bang for your buck, okay? So your marginal benefit comes down a bit. On the second piece, marginal cost starts to go up a bit, okay? Now you're with your friends and about half an hour goes by and the waiter or waitress comes by, do you want a third piece? And you're still a little hungry, so you order that third piece. Now your marginal benefit has come down and your marginal cost is about here, okay? And let's say they're those really big slices of pizza and you fold them over and all that good stuff. And you finish it. 15, 20 minutes go by, the waiter or waitress comes by, you say, hey, guess what? We're running a special. If you've had 3 pieces, you get the 4th piece for half off. Well, wow, you're thinking the 4th piece, half off. That sounds pretty good. But here's the catch. You are completely full. You're completely stuffed. Do you order that 4th piece of pizza? Well, if you did, even though your marginal cost has been, lessened because of the fact of the special, so it's only going to go up a little bit, the marginal benefit, there isn't any marginal benefit there. This is a case where marginal benefit actually can go into the negative numbers. What happens is if you do order that and eat that 4th piece, you don't get any enjoyment out of it. You actually end up, and you're feeling really uncomfortable. You are overstuffed, okay? You are uncomfortable. That would be marginal benefit going into the negative, okay? So where you want to stop, where the optimal place to be is at, and if this was microeconomics, we would be talking about this a lot more, but still holds true in macro, is where your marginal cost is equal to your marginal benefit. And if you forget everything else this semester from this class, remember that. The optimal point is where your marginal cost equals your marginal benefit. And guess what? Guess when that's true? It's true all the time, which is a rare thing to say in economics, okay? Because even the law of demand, we condition it with, well, all right, what they love to say, ceteris paribus, all other things being equal. But this is true all the time. The best place to be is where your marginal cost equals your marginal benefit, all right? That is your optimization point. That is the point that if you're in business and you're making money, that is where you're going to maximize your profit. Or let's say the pricing structure of the market was such that the price of your product was really, really, really low and you're losing money. That's still the best place to be because you will minimize your loss, all right? So that's where we look at marginal cost and marginal benefit, all right? Okay, so again, that's a little quick comparison of the two, but that is always true, and it is true for production, consumption. Whether am I going to make one more? It doesn't have to be just consumption. Am I going to make one more? Well, okay, if you make one more of something, what's the marginal benefit? What's the marginal cost? Even has to do with environmental control equipment. And I don't want to get into a big discussion about that because some students will say, oh, the more the better. Well, even at that, there is an optimization point where the marginal cost equals the marginal benefit. That is the best place to be. All right? Okay, so when we move on to markets. Markets, not a big deal for you to understand. What do markets do? Markets, they bring the buyers and the sellers together, all right? And this is true whether it's the market for oranges, at one of these, fresh fruit produce open air stands that they have all over, big ones, small ones, or even if it's the financial market. The market brings the buyers, if it's a financial market, it brings the buyers of money and the sellers of money together, okay? Now in this little chart that we got, a graph, we're just showing that we have households, which is you and I, and we have firms. We have the product market, which actually that's where the product is from, and we have the resource market. Resources, land, labor, capital, okay? Us, you and I, okay? So basically you really know this stuff. We offer our labor in the resource market, and what do firms do? Well, to be real general and to be as broad as we can about it, what does a firm do? A firm uses inputs to produce output, okay? And that's exactly what it does. The firm here draws from the resource market, whatever it needs, and labor, you and I, is most important. And from drawing that, it creates output. The firm takes input, makes output, and takes that output, the products, and brings it to the product market, all right? Well, what happens? Well, and there's a flow here. There is a flow of either products or us offering our services going one way, and cash goes the other way. Because if we're offering our services to the firms, we hopefully are expected to get paid. So the cash is going the other way, all right? Now the product market pays the firms for the product, okay? Then what happens? Then our households, we go to the product market and we buy that product, okay? So, whatever it is, whether it's a Ford F-150 truck or a stereo or whatever it is, we buy the product, so the product flows into us, and we end up buying it, so we give money to the product market, okay? So, that is the basic flow. Cash flows one way, the products or the services that we render flow the other, all right? Now, one of the foundations is trade creates value. Well, what does that mean? Well, this is too bad we're not on campus right now because I give we do a great exercise with this one. typically in my classroom, I have, I have 9 children. They're all adult children now, 7 daughters and 2 sons. And what I did was I will tell them to go get a bunch of items, at the dollar store or something. And the girls and my sons will get a bunch of things. Then I'll distribute them to the class. And if I end up giving and again, not to sound not to sound sexist, but if I give things that typically a boy would appreciate more than a girl, if I give the item that a girl would use more, I give those to the boys and vice versa. And then I tell everybody, all right, give me a number from 0 to 10 in terms of utility. And again, remember, when we talk about benefit, you could talk about you could call it benefit, utility, happiness, whatever you affirm, its revenue. All right, so in this exercise, the class, they'll rank, and typically they're not real super thrilled about some of the items that they got. So, and when I tally it all up, I say, okay, give me your number from 0 to 10. And we do. And it might be somewhere in the neighborhood of 65, 70, 75 utils, we'll call them, all right? Then I say to the class, okay, you got the next 5 minutes, you are free to trade. Go ahead, make any deal you want with anybody else. And they do, okay? And they're going back and forth, and after 5 minutes is over, I do it again. I say, okay, now, and the thing that makes this class really popular is you get to keep the item. I say, all right, what is the utility value of what you have? And rule of thumb, by and large, it's typical, always, it's about double of what it was. So if it was 70 utility points after the trade, it's about 150. So I say to the class, now wait a minute, did we add any goods or services to our mix? And no, we didn't add any. There were no goods introduced into the market, all right? Did we add any more consumers? No, we have the same number of folks, we have the same stuff, all right? So what happened? We doubled our utility, okay? What happened was, through trade, you changed what you didn't value as much, and that's what happens in trade. You're trading something that you don't value as much for something that you value more, and the other person is doing just the opposite. So that's the whole concept behind trade creates value, okay? Now, we have, in trade, we have Adam Smith. Interestingly enough, Adam Smith and David Ricardo, they both lived. David Ricardo was a little younger, but they did live, there was an overlap there. Now, Adam Smith gives us the idea of absolute advantage, all right? That just means that, hey, a country you can just flat out, you're better at making, you can make more, okay? Whether it's, in your book, it's pizzas and wings. Some books use iPhones and trucks. It doesn't really matter. The idea is you're flat out, you can make more. You're more efficient, okay? So if you are, Adam Smith says, hey, you have an absolute advantage in that particular good, all right? Now, what he would recommend is, they were both for trade, but Adam Smith would say, okay, if your country is really good at making, we'll say with pizzas and wings, and another country comes up to you, and you can make more pizzas and wings, as we're going to see in a minute. what should you do? Well, the other country should find items that they have an absolute advantage in, and then they should trade, okay? That will benefit both countries, and that is true. Now, David Ricardo, he is the one that actually was alive during the time Adam Smith was alive, and guess what? David Ricardo was going on vacation. And so instead of taking a trashy novel with him, what does he take? He takes The Wealth of Nations, the classic book that Adam Smith wrote in 1776. And he's reading this book while he's on vacation. And he says, you know, this Adam Smith, he makes a lot of sense. But he said, I think I can take this one step further. And he does. What he says is that, look, even if a country can't make as much as another country of a particular item, what we really have to look at is, what does it cost you to make that item? In other words, what are you giving up? What is your opportunity cost to make that item? And David Ricardo says it all centers around, hey, what are your internal costs? What are your opportunity costs for that? Okay? And what David Ricardo would say is, even if you can't make as much of a particular item as the other country, if your opportunity costs are lower, you don't have an absolute advantage, but you would have a comparative advantage. And what is important is that you concentrate on where your opportunity costs are lowest, and the other country concentrates on items where their opportunity costs are lower, and then you trade. And then both countries will benefit. We're going to see that in a minute, okay? But I just want to touch on that. All right. I know in your book, you talk about model building. Well, they said, ceteris paribus, everything, all other things being equal. My students love that. They usually start out, when I ask them questions in the classroom, they'll say, well, it depends. Okay, so it's another way of saying it depends on, okay, if this and this and this are happening, then this will happen, okay? And that's true in economics. A lot of times it does depend. It depends on, okay, what is going on here, all right? So we say, okay, all other things being equal, all right? And when we're looking at model building, we have what we come across positive and normative economics, okay? Positive economics does not mean it's just good news, all right? Positive economics doesn't mean it's positive, okay? It means that it is a statement of fact that, is either true or not true, but it's a statement of fact, all right? Normative economics means the way things ought to be, okay? So in terms of analysis, for instance, if President Biden has has a whole army of economic advisors, they may say to him, all right, you have 5 different options for moving forward with the economy, all right? Now, that's positive economics. They're not saying, which one. They're just saying, you got 5. Now, 4 of them could be god-awful. 4 of them could be terrible, all right? The 5th one would be a big help to the economy. Okay, they're not telling them which one. They're just saying, this is positive economics, you've got 5 options. Now, normative economics comes into play where you see the word should or ought. So now the policymakers would advise him, you should do that 5th one, the one that gives you a good result for the economy, all right? That's normative. Normative economics means you should do this or you ought to do this, okay? We'll see this again when we talk about efficiency and equity, all right? Now, again, we're not going to spend too much time on model building, but model building for economics is important in this respect. We use models all the time. We have to, because models are simplifications of a very complex world out there, right? If we tried to talk about, well, we're going to talk about in a minute, production possibility frontier. If we tried to think about all the products that a country can produce, it would take us forever just setting up the model. So models in economics are important. Classic one is supply and demand. It's a simplification of the real world, okay? And in model building, we have endogenous factors that are inside our model, okay, that come from the inside of the model, and exogenous factors that perhaps we didn't build into the model, and it's an outside effect. Okay, they talk about the Wright brothers and some things that were outside of the model, or those are exogenous. All right, we'll see this again when we look at growth theory. Okay, but it's okay. Just for now, this will be enough for us right now. Okay, now when we do build models, are assumptions important? Well, yes, they are very important, because if you start off with the wrong assumptions, you're going to end up with a real mess on your hands. For instance, when they were building the model, when a lot of these hedge fund managers thought they had put together a really good model of the economy, this goes back in the mid-2000s, they said, okay, this is how it should work. But they had two assumptions that were not accurate. First assumption was that they felt that the price of housing, and in all fairness, that wasn't a bad assumption. The price of housing would continue to rise. And over the years, in the 50s and the 60s, 70s, the price of housing, it did go steadily up. There was always something good to invest in, home, okay? They said that, okay, the price of houses is going to continue to rise, and they put in a default rate for people who, would default on their mortgages, and it was going to be at such and such a rate, okay? Then came the housing bubble, and the price of housing didn't rise. I mean, it just ballooned, okay? And then what happened? Well, those balloons popped, and then guess what? The price of housing crashed, all right? And at the same time, with that price of housing crashing, people who really couldn't afford the mortgages in the first place, and really weren't buying those houses to live in. They were buying them because the bubble was going up so rapidly and quickly. They were just buying them to hold them for maybe 6 months or a year, and then turn around and sell them. And where the banking system got involved, they were giving them these great teaser loans that for the first 6 months or year had really low payments. So it was working out. They could take on a mortgage that they couldn't afford, but they could afford it with the low teaser rate for the first 6 to 12 months, and then they'd sell the house, and then they were making a profit at the end. But when the housing prices, when the balloon popped, then all of a sudden the default rates went way up, okay? And that gave us the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, and quite honestly, the effects of that Great Recession lasted a lot longer than 2009. Its effects, you could feel them. If any of us lived through it, 2010 to 2011, that was no picnic, okay? All right, so brings us to the word efficiency, okay? Efficiency, it means you have fully utilized all the capacity of every asset you have. You have, in other words, how I like to say it, you have pulled out all the utility of every asset you have. You can't do any better than that. If you've pulled out all the utility of every asset you've got, you can't do any better than that, okay? And efficiency applies to many things. You know, you can do efficiency not only in production, you know, getting the most efficiency out of your equipment and people. Even could be efficiency in distribution, for instance. Let's say I had a big bag of jelly beans, and we were in class, and I was very meticulous, and each and every one of you got, you know, 5 jelly beans, all right? And at the end, giving each and every one of you 5, I had 0 left in the bag. Well, I was totally efficient in my distribution, okay? So, again, if any of you, though, wanted to be made happier or wanted more, one of the hallmarks of being totally efficient is saying, hey, look, I can't make you any happier unless I make somebody else a little less happy, all right? So, because I was totally efficient in my distribution. Same thing with totally efficient in your production, all right? You pulled out all the utility from that equipment, from the people. You can't do any better than that. You are maxed out. You can't get any more production, all right? You pulled out everything, okay? Now, this doesn't address the idea of equity. Equity, and again, this is going back to positive and normative. They like to use, or I like to use the example of, let's say you own a parking garage, and let's say we're near Washington, D.C., where the parking is really tough to get, all right? You set up this parking garage, and your whether, you know, your combination of your economist and your accountant lays out, you know, they do the striping on the floors, and, you know, they've laid it all out for you, and they come to you and say, here, we've got it. 300 parking spaces. With that, you'll be totally efficient in what you're offering. You know, 300 parking spaces. But then someone might come to you and say, hey, look, you know, this parking garage, it's a lot of folks who are handicapped, you know, will come to these stores and they'll use your parking garage. You know, we need to do something. We need to make some kind of accommodation for them. And then, you know, if you economist or accountant might say, no, I mean, you know, it's going to mess us all. We have to do a space and a half for handicapped parking. This, you know, so on and so forth. We will not be totally efficient. That's the rub. Because in life, let's face it, we haven't all been dealt the same hand. So it would be nice that efficiency and equity always move hand to hand. But in real life, that doesn't happen. So you think, okay, I mean, to be fair, and that's what equity means. It doesn't mean equal. Equity means fairness. To be fair, you say, all right, we're going to do 20 handicap parking spots. And are you giving up some efficiency? Yes, you are. But in real life, sometimes we have to give up some efficiency for equity, for fairness, all right? But again, equity is not equal. It is fair, okay? All right, so let's move on to the first big one, production possibility frontier. So to make it simple, we're going to say a country can produce 2 products. I know, it's simplistic, but bear with me. So we're talking about, let's say our country produces either cars or boats, all right? Now, if we throw everything we've got, land, buildings, every asset, every person, at making cars, let's say, and we do it totally efficient. We are running flat out we can make, let's say, 50 million cars, all right, a year. If, on the other hand, we decide to make boats and we throw every piece of equipment, building, land, people, everything, and we are all operating at 100% efficiency, we can make 60 million boats, all right? These are the two extremes, all right? Now, if we connect these two extremes, all we're doing is drawing a line that it's giving us different combinations of cars and boats, because probably our society is not going to want all cars or all boats, all right? The thing to remember is, when we connect these, even though they're different combinations of cars and boats, everything is still running at 100% efficiency, all right? So, if you've got machinery in your plant and you're going to run 60% cars and 40% boats, that machinery and those folks running those pieces of equipment, they are running flat out, 100% efficiency, okay? You can't do any better than that. That's why they call it a production possibility frontier. It is the frontier. You can't do any better than this. You can't do any better than 100% efficiency. So points outside of this line they're not feasible with our current resources, all right? We can't, and technology, all right, the use of knowledge, all right? So these are not feasible. Inside this line, these points are feasible, but they're not totally efficient. Well, in the history of the world, I don't think any country really operated at total efficiency, because can you imagine every asset in the country running all the time at 100% efficiency? It's kind of hard to imagine. But anyway, outside it's not feasible with the current resources and technology. Inside, feasible, but we're not totally efficient, okay? Now, with a straight line, that means we have, when we're switching from cars to boats, we're making more boats, more boats. We have a straight line if we have constant opportunity costs. What that means is that our equipment, we can switch it over for making cars or boats. It doesn't matter. The equipment, it switches over, just as easily. It can make cars or boats. So we're incurring the same opportunity cost, okay? But in real life, we know that's not really necessarily true. In real life, the production possibility curve, it bows outward, okay? And why is that? Well, it bows outward because, let's face it, every piece of equipment is not the same. It's not, all machinery can't do either cars or boats at the same rate. People, you and I, we all have different skills. We are better at some things than we are at others, all right? So a bowed out production possibility frontier just means that as we try to make more and more of one item, we're using assets that really aren't suited to make that particular good or service, okay? So, but we are using it, and it's costing us more. So that bows the whole production possibility curve outward, all right? Because we're using up a lot as we approach either extreme. We're using equipment or people. Let's say you've got 50% boat machines and 50% car machines. Well, can the boat machines make cars? Yeah, they can make them, but it's really, really slow. So it's costing us a lot of money. And the other side of the coin is also true. If we're going to make more and more boats, and we're at this extreme, we're using assets that really aren't designed for that particular item. So we're using car machines to make boats. Can they make Boats, yes. Can they make very many of them? No, because they weren't made to make boats. Now, are they operating, and here's the key, are they operating as fast as they can go? Yes, they are. So they are still totally efficient, all right? But it's just the nature of the beast. They weren't made to make that particular item, all right? Just like you and I. I mean, you folks out there have different skills at doing something. Can you do something else? Well, sure you could. And maybe you're going to work as hard as you possibly can. You're operating at 100% efficiency, but you just don't make as much, okay? So it's costing you more, all right? Example would be the person with the 30 acres of land. 10 acres are rich soil, 10 acres are moderate, and 10 acres are rocky soil, okay? The town mayor comes to that person and says, hey, we really love the wheat you're growing, doing a great job, keep it up. Where would you plant, your wheat at first? Well, you plant it on the real fertile ground because that's giving you the biggest bang for your buck. And you only have to hire one person per acre to generate, wheat from that land. Now, as the mayor comes back to says, hey, town loves your wheat, we want more of your wheat. Well, you say, okay, I've got this average soil. It's not the best, but I could use it. And you do. So you plant on your average soil, all right? Now, this soil is costing you 3 people per acre to harvest wheat from. Are the people working as hard as they can? Yes, they are. Is that land giving you as much as it can? Yes, it is. So in terms of efficiency, it's doing the best it can. It's just not going to be real productive. It's just costing you more. And if the mayor comes back and says, we want even more wheat, the only alternative is the 10 acres of really rocky soil. And you really kind of don't want to plant there. But if they insist, and you do, well, now you've got 10 folks working per acre, and you're not getting much return, okay? And what's happened? Well, your labor costs have gone up by 10, and you're not getting very much return. That's the same thing with this production possibility blowing out. As we continue to go on and on, in this case moving towards one product or another, we're using assets that really weren't designed for that particular item. Perhaps the rocky soil would be better, for mineral exploration, something like that. All right. So we have an outward bowing production possibility curve because we have increasing opportunity costs when we try to use assets that really weren't designed to make a particular item. Okay? Will it make some items? Yeah. Is it going to cost us more? You bet. That's why it's bowed out. Now, this whole curve can shift outward, okay, because of increases in factors of production, land, labor, capital, and human capital, which we'll talk about a little bit later, or technology. Technology usually is the biggie, okay? That can shift the whole curve outward. Now, does it always shift out evenly? Well, no, because we might have a technology that it's rare when you get a technology. Although the internet was probably a good example of increasing production across the board. But in terms of, let's say, manufacturing, it's rare when you're going to get, let's say, this new piece of technology can increase production. Let's say it increases production of making cars, but not so much in making pizzas. So it increases pizza production a little bit, but increases the car production by a lot. So you're going to, with something like that, you'd see it bowing outward, but you'd see a big, a big movement here, not so much down here. And that's true very often in life. Sometimes, however, you'll get a technology that cuts across the board. It helps everyone. And again, those are great. But very often you'll get increases in the factors of production or technology that favor one particular good or service over another. So it doesn't always bow out evenly. Okay? All right. All right, that's the first board. Okay? Hope everybody's staying with us. Okay. All right, and again, I apologize. Our next week's class, we will have a little better lineup. That brings us to the difference between a quantity demanded and demand. Okay, demand and supply, the two biggies in economics. Okay, so what is a quantity demand? Well, a quantity demanded is one point. It's one specific amount that you and I want at a particular price, okay? And that's exactly what we're saying here. So it's a specific amount. It's just one point, okay? And we talk about, well, demand schedule. Okay, well, what's happening with the demand schedule is, hey, I put out a certain price. You come back and say, okay, at that price, we want this many. I give you another price, you come back with another quantity demanded. Another price, another. And what we do is we build a demand schedule, okay? Price, quantity, price, quantity, price, quantity. Now remember, with supply and demand, we have the Y and the X axis. But this is important to remember. The y-axis is price, okay? Typically has to do with the number, generally with price, y-axis, okay? And it's easy for us, to see if something's moving, price-wise up or down. The x-axis has to do with typically quantity, all right? How much, okay? Now, from previous classes that you've taken, when you see a graph like this, you look at the x-axis usually is the one that drives the y-axis, meaning you pick up a variable on the x-axis and you'll have a resultant variable on the y-axis. All right, with economics for our main graph, it's just the opposite, okay? Price is the driver, okay? Price. It's the greatest signal in the marketplace. It is the greatest signal to the producers, giving them the signal to how much they're going to produce, and it's the greatest signal to the demanders, consumers, you and I, how much we want to buy. And again, a lot of this, you're already, you can think, hey, I already know this, all right? And a lot of times with economics, all you need to do is you see a term or you see something happening, you take a step back and you just ask yourself, all right, what's going on here? What's happening? And then just let the answer come. And your common sense, 90% of the time, will give you that answer. Okay? So, we start out with one point. That is a quantity demanded. That's not demand. All right? It's a quantity demanded. But if I keep throwing out more and more and more and more prices of that product, all right, I'm filling in all these little dots, okay? And if I mention every single price possible, and you come back to me with every single quantity that you want, we have what is called a demand curve. It's overall demand, and this is important to remember, at every single price level. That's demand. That is demand. We talk about demand, that's all the quantities demanded at every single price level. Quantity demanded is just one point. Demand, it's all the points, okay? And you already have seen it, you already practiced this, if the price goes up, generally speaking, the quantity demanded will go down. That just makes sense. You know, you're going to go, let's say you're going to go to Target or Myers and, you know, it's cold outside, you didn't have any sweaters, didn't get any for Christmas, so you're a little irritated, but you heard that they've got them for $14, all right, at Myers. And you're thinking, boy, $14, pretty good price. I'm going to buy 6 sweaters, all right? That's a quantity demanded. It's 1 point at a specific price. You get to Myers and you find out, oh, they're not $14. They're $18. You say, well, wait a minute, $18. Well, I guess I don't really need 6. I could probably get by with 4. So you throw out another quantity demanded at the higher price. So the price went up to $18. Your quantity demanded went down from 6 down to 4. So we have that inverse relationship, a negative relationship. And that's what gives us the negative slope of the demand curve. Because as one is going up, the other is going down, and vice versa. Remember, whatever we say at one time, if the opposite happens, then we have just the opposite occurrence. So if one's going up, the other's going down, or if one's going down, the other's going up. Long, short, we got a negative relationship, gives us the negative slope of the demand curve. All right? Now, for this demand curve and supply curve, we got basically 2 possibilities. We have a movement along the demand and or the supply curve, meaning we'll go from 1 point here, we'll slide up the demand curve and back to this point. That's a movement along. We stay on the demand curve, no big deal. You just did it with the sweaters. We're going to buy 6, the price went up, so you're not buying 6 anymore, you're going to buy 4, okay? So you went from 1 point to another, all right? That is a movement along, okay? And that's true of both. You can have movements along the demand curve and movements along the supply curve. The other that can happen, it's called a shift, okay? Both the demand curve and the supply curve can shift. And what you have to remember is any shift to the right of either demand or supply means more is being transacted for. Any shift to the left means less is being transacted for. Okay? All right. So, here brings us the law of demand. Always true, almost. All right? Other things equal, the quantity demanded falls when the price rises, and the quantity demanded rises when the price falls. Okay? Practically almost always true. Now, are there exceptions? Sure. All right? Let's say it's end of May, beginning of June. We got a forecast is for a long, hot summer ahead of us. All right? Here we are, anxious for summer. And I had a professor who loved to give this question on tests. The price of swimsuits goes up. Okay? And yet the quantity demanded of those swimsuits also goes up a little. Is this refuting the law of demand? Well, no, because in this case, all other things are not equal. What's happened is the seasonal effect of this long, hot summer looming in front of us that we're about to enjoy, it overcame our objection to the price going up. So it overcame that. So all other things were not equal. Now, if this happened at the very end of September, price goes up and the quantity demanded also goes up. Now that would be a different story. But in general, this is true. Okay? All right. remember though, a price change causes a movement along, like we were talking about, a demand and or a supply curve. But it doesn't cause the whole curve to shift, all right? Because a shift means that there is a change at every single price level, okay? There's less demand at every single price level, or there's more demand if it shifts to the right, at every single price level, okay? Those are shifts. Price increase causes a movement along where, yes, if the price went up, you move from one point on demand to another point where there would be less that you would want. But a shift means at every price level, just less is going to be demanded. Or at every price level, more is going to be demanded. Okay? That's the difference between moving along demand or supply curve and a shift of the demand or supply curve. All right? Okay. So we got more demand. We have the whole demand curve shifting to the right. Less demand, something happened. The whole demand curve is shifting to the left. Okay? Now, and again, this is not the price change. Number one, national income rises or falls. Well, if national income goes up, and let's say national income across the board goes up, all right? And I know you're saying, well, the rich don't need the additional income, but let's say national income for some reason goes up, and everybody's got more income. Well, you got super wealthy, wealthy, upper middle, lower middle, lower middle, poor. But if everybody has more income, well, demand at every price level is going to increase. So that would be a shift. So this would shift demand to the right because at every price level, there's going to be more demanded. Okay? Now, price of related goods. I know a lot of my students say, wait a minute, you said price doesn't cause a shift. Okay, a price change of the good itself that you're looking at doesn't cause a shift. But the price change of a related good could cause a shift. So, for instance, then we talk about substitutes or complements. So, a lot of books will use blue jeans and khakis. Some books use tea and coffee. You know, blue jeans and khakis as substitutes, coffee and tea. I know not so much in this country, but let's say coffee and tea were substitute goods, all right? Well, and they were very, very good substitutes. You know, whether or not that's true, for our example, we'll just go with it, all right? Well, if the price of coffee goes way up, now we're concentrating on tea, okay? Didn't say anything about the price of tea, but the price of a related good, a substitute, the price of that substitute goes way up. Well, what's going to happen? Well, people are going to switch over from coffee to join the ranks of the already tea drinkers. And are you going to get folks that are buying it at every price level? Yeah. You're going to get folks, buying it, high, medium, and low. So there's going to be a general increase in the demand for tea. Again, at every single price level. Because you got those folks coming over, okay? And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but this is what it looks like. For substitute, price of the first good goes up, the quantity demanded for that first good will go down, and here's the tea, the quantity demanded will, go up. So complements, it's just the same, all right? Preferences, tastes, all right. That can happen. That can shift the whole curve over. Back in the 70s and 80s, the North Face came out, and boy, everybody wanted the North Face products. Okay, that and that was true for ski vests, parkas, sweaters. That was a situation where, in general, at every price level, people wanted more North Face stuff. That shifted the demand to the right. Now, was it a fad, or was it just a temporary change in taste? Maybe. North Face knew they had a good thing going, and they tried their best to produce a quality product. They were trying to take the longer view, which something that American companies get criticized a lot for, because they don't take the longer view, and they always use the Japanese as an example of, a country that the folks take the longer view. Okay, American companies have been criticized by taking the short-term view. So if this shifted to the right and North Face said, "Hey, we'll squeeze every drop of profit we can out of this right now," that would be a short-term view. Longer-term view would say, "Hey, look, we got a good thing going. We got this whole demand curve shifted over. Let's try to produce as high a quality product as we can and keep that shift as permanent a situation as we can." Now, did it shift back? Yeah, I mean, there was a certain element of fad to it, but I will say it did shift to the right, and it did shift back, but still, it was still, I believe, ahead of where it was originally. Okay, so taste, preferences, and again, tastes for a certain item at every price level. That's why it's the whole curve shifting. All right, tastes and preference. Let's say for chocolate. All right, you got really expensive chocolate, moderately expensive chocolate, kind of really inexpensive chocolate. If the taste, everybody's really crazy about having chocolate. Well, that being the case, if everyone is at every price level, that's going to increase the demand for chocolate. Again, at every single price level. Okay? All right. Expectations. Okay. Expectations, very important. We're going to see expectations throughout the semester, again and again and again. Milton Friedman, famous economist, said expectations are very, very, very powerful. Next to unemployment, he said expectations was the most important factor in terms of inflation. And expectation, it is true. I mean, how you feel. How do you feel the economy is going to do? How do you feel things are going to be? And it's like some of those self-help books, You feel or you visualize something happening and you believe it. It's somewhat like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Chances are that thing is going to happen. You're going to gear your activities, your thoughts, your words, your actions towards having that happen. Same thing with expectations. And I could use the example of when we were talking about when President Reagan was elected in 1980. We were coming out of a terrible slump because we had just gotten creamed with two big OPEC oil increases. Well, Reagan came on and he addressed the nation, and he said, "Hey, look, now I know things aren't great right now, but," he said, "we are going to get better. We're definitely, absolutely getting better. Our best days are ahead of us. Our most productive, the most wonderful days are ahead of us." And he said it so convincingly that it made you just feel better. So, expectations are important. Now, getting back to costs, let's say you had a favorite nephew and his birthday was 3 months down the road, all right? And you were going to get him a really nice bike for his birthday. But you're reading the Wall Street Journal and you're watching the news and you're saying, "Hey, that specialty titanium plant that makes the metal for that bike, it blew up last week." And then you're reading about that huge monsoon in India that wiped out all those special rubber trees that make the special rubber that goes into the tires for this bike. Well, you know, you're probably, you're smart enough to be thinking, well, that pipeline, and as we are all aware of supply problems, which I don't have time to get into right now, but you're probably thinking, well, once those ripple effects come through, that bike that I'm looking at, that's going to be a lot more expensive 3 months from now. So what do? Well, typically you will buy it now, okay? So expectations, if you anticipate higher prices, and could be true of an expensive bike, maybe I'm looking at a moderately priced bike for my nephew, maybe I don't like him as much, and somebody else is looking for a bike that's a cheaper bike, but if the same scenario applies, we're going to buy it now, okay? Because we expect prices to be higher. That's going to shift demand to the right, okay? Real easy one, number of consumers. Well, World War II, for instance. December 7th, 1941, what happens? Most of my class don't know what happens, but World War II, Japan bombs Pearl Harbor, we're in World War II. Now at that point, I believe we had roughly half the population that we have today, but we took 12 million men and women out of our economy and we put them in uniform to fight World War II. Well, you have something like that, you take 12 million consumers out of your economy. It doesn't take an economic genius to know that this demand curve is going to shift to the left. Because remember, left is less being transacted for, shifting to the right is more being transacted for. Okay? Excise or sales tax, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. In general, tax, if it's taking money out of your pocket and my pocket, doesn't matter, rich, pretty rich, moderate, poor, if we have less money to spend, we end up spending less money. So at every price level, increase in taxes is going to cause demand curve to shift to the left. Okay? All right. And again, all these occurrences, these six, can go one way or the other. Our national income could drop, God forbid, but if it does, you know, at every strata of the economy, every price level, we're not going to be buying more. We're going to be buying less. Okay? All right. So that is quantity demanded, 1 point, and demand, which is all the points. Okay? All right. Now, we will talk about supply, all right? Let me see if I can adjust the lights. Again, I apologize. My other, the rest of these, hang on for a second. I want to see if I can adjust. All right, so the other side of the coin are the suppliers. Remember, we only have 2 types of folks in our class for the rest of the semester. We don't have Catholics, Presbyterians, Asians, Native American Indian. We don't have any of that stuff. All we have are producers and consumers, okay? And quite honestly, we need both to drive the economy, okay? So let's not just concentrate on the demanders, because the supply side of the economy is extremely important as well, all right? Now, we're going to take a look at that supply side right now. Now, again, talking about supply. Now we are not purchasing the items anymore. We are supplying them. Okay, so if the price in general is going up and we're supplying the item, well, the demanders weren't happy about it, But you and I as suppliers, yeah, that's great. We are happy about that. In general, we will want to supply more at a higher price, okay? And it just makes common sense. You're going to want to supply more of it, okay? Now, we say that since the price going up and the quantity supplied going up, they move together. Now, whether they're moving up together or down together, we call that a positive relationship, okay? So, that gives us an upward sloping supply curve. Later on in the semester, if we have a minute, we'll talk about some exceptions, but just for by and large for now, we'll say that the quantity, supply slopes up, okay? Now, just like with demand, quantity supplied is one specific quantity that, now we're producers, that you and I as producers are willing to produce to the economy, all right, at a specific price. Again, as I said, price is the greatest signal to the market. It's the greatest signal to the demanders, and here it's the greatest signal to the suppliers, all right? So, now, quantity supplied is that, again, that certain amount of a good or service given a specific price, all right? Now, I can do the supply schedule again. Throw out a price. Now, if you are suppliers, I throw out a price, you're going to come back to me saying, okay, at that price, we'll supply so much. And go back and forth, and that's the supply schedule, all right? Now, just like with demand, we can have a movement along a supply curve, okay, which is predicated by the change in the price, or the whole supply curve can change. And again, quantity supplied is one point at one particular price. But if I keep giving more and more and more prices out, I'm going to be, putting more and more and more dots until I finally connected all the dots and I have the entire supply curve, all right? That is overall supply at every single price level. It includes all the quantities supplied, okay? All right. And again, market supply, we add up quantity supplied by each seller in the market. We have what is known as market supply, okay? But here again, I want to talk about price going up. Typically, the quantity supplied will go up. Price going down, typically the quantity supplied going down. And I'll give you an example. In our case, we had a couple of manufacturing companies. We did a lot of precision parts for the big three and for defense. Made a lot of parts for the F-16, F-18. Did the first anti-skid parts, first airbag parts. We made the first airbag parts. But anyway, regardless, what I'm getting at is the equipment that we had to make these things was very, very expensive. Now just picture, you and I, we're all producers now. We're all manufacturers, all right? And you've got in your plant, you've got brand new, and these machine centers are pretty expensive, very expensive. You've got some brand new pieces of equipment. You've got some pretty new, pretty good equipment. You had them around for a while, but, pretty good. Then you got some old equipment. I mean, you've written them off, you've depreciated them completely, but they still run. Do they run very quickly? No, they're pretty slow. You're getting about 60% production on it, okay? Now, here's an example. If we're making a particular item, whatever it is, and in the marketplace, the price of that item goes up. Well, if it goes up high enough, you can afford to run all your equipment, even the slow stuff, because the price is so high, even though it's not as efficient. The price is so high that you can afford even to run the slow stuff. But now, if the price starts coming down, coming down, coming down, and it starts to get really low, well, you certainly cannot afford to run the old equipment, and you may not be able to run all of your, your fairly new equipment, maybe only a few of the machine centers. You only will be able to run your brand new machine centers because they are the fastest. And those are the fastest, and those are the only ones that are going to enable you to operate at this really low price, okay? That's another reason why this, we're supplying less. It's not that we're greedy suppliers, it's just that, hey, at this really, really low price, we cannot afford to produce that much. We can only run our brand new equipment, all right? All the other equipment that we'd love to have running, we can't afford to run at this really, really cheap price, okay? All right. So, just as a price change will cause a movement along, and it moves together, we can have something that will cause the whole curve to shift, all right? Now, again, entire shift to the left is less, and a shift to the right is more, okay? Now, what happened? Well, number one, cost of inputs. Now remember, we talked about what is a business, what is a firm? A firm is someone or something that uses inputs to make output, okay? We try to be as generic and simple as possible, all right? Now, if you have a fixed budget, typically you have a fixed budget, and one of your key inputs goes way up in price, all right? Well, can you make more or less product? Well, I mean, if your input went way up in price, you're going to be making less product, all right? So that would be an example, and it would be less product. Doesn't matter the price level, expensive, moderate, or inexpensive. If you're making expensive bikes, moderately priced bikes, or inexpensive, it doesn't matter. If your key input has gone way up in price, you're going to be making less at every single price level, all right? That would be a shift to the left because you're making less, all right? That's what happened with oil. That's why when we talked about, we got creamed by OPEC in the 70s twice, all right? Now, what did that mean? Well, some items are more important than others, or some are less important. Now, for instance, if you had a company that made a lot of precision, let's say you made a lot of stainless steel bone screws. I had a friend in Chicago, his company makes a lot of the bone screws for the medical industry, all right? All, very special material, stainless, so on and so forth. Now, if the price of, and let's say there was a specialty type of wood that a friend of yours used to make beautiful wooden statues with, okay? Now, if the price of this specialty wood went up quite a bit, would it affect your business all that much? Well, you feel sorry for the person, but not really, because it's your key ingredient, aside from labor, which is the number one, is the stainless steel, okay? But there are some things, and oil is one of them, that cuts clear across industry. All our equipment, all our machinery, we need oil in our machinery, all right? To keep that machinery going. We need oil in our delivery systems, in our trucks, in our cars. So oil is a big deal. So when oil goes up, it affects supply quite a bit. So that's a big input. That would shift supply to the left, okay? All right. Change in the price of related good. Somewhat similar to demand, but here we've got, again, related goods, remember, they're either complements or substitutes. Related goods, substitutes mean either or. Either I use this or I use that, all right? Complements you use together, all right? A great example, again, tea and coffee, but that would be in terms of demand. But here we are looking at substitutes. Those are co-produced. So let's say you have a mining company. You can make either one or the other. You make gasoline or heating oil, but it's your call. You know, you're going to make one or the other. Those are substitutes, okay? Sometimes you get into a situation where you get both, all right? And those would be complements, all right? So natural gas and oil. When you're exploring for natural gas, sometimes you get a byproduct or you'll get both, okay? Those are complements. Same thing, complements move together, all right? Substitutes move in opposite directions. And if it's a substitute, just like with demand, the price of first item goes up, supply, and here this is supply, so we're going up. And since this is a substitute, supply will go down because you're going up with the first one. The other one, price of one goes up. Hey, these are substitutes. You're going to supply both of them, all right? So they both go up, all right? Next one is taxes or subsidies, somewhat similar to individuals, you and I. We have less money. If the business, and we're going to look at the tax implications of what happens to demand and supply, who bears the burden. But in general, if there's a tax, businesses have less money, you're going to shift it to the left, okay? A subsidy, on the other hand, well, that's a different story. You're going to shift it to the right, okay? Okay, and expectations. Here, expectations, I skipped suppliers. Well, suppliers is pretty obvious. If we're all making tires, okay, and you and your friends are saying, you know what, I got all this expensive equipment, we're knocking ourselves out making tires. This tire business is killing us. It's just so competitive. We're not making as much money as I think we should, especially in light of the expensive equipment that we got, okay? I'm going to get out of the tire making business. I'm going to go into the dampener control, the vibration control business. We can make these fancy vibration control mounts, for engine mounts, for cars and trucks, and we can make a lot more money doing that. And let's say you do, and a number of your friends see what you're doing, and they decide, yeah, you're right. We're going to exit. It's called exiting the industry. Well, if the number of suppliers goes down, just like the population, it's going to be less folks supplying, so it's a shift to the left, okay? All right, then expectations. Expectations is for suppliers is just the opposite of the demanders. If, we were buying those bikes, and 3 months from now, we expect them to be a lot more expensive, we're going to increase our demand now. We're going to buy them now. But if you are the supplier of a product, let's say whatever it is, and you thought 3 months down the road, that item that we're making in our plant is going to go way up in price, all right? What might you do? Well, you might, and let's say it's an expensive item, because I know some of your students are saying, oh, we'll just run the heck out of it and stockpile it. No, you don't want to carry a 90-day inventory of really expensive product, okay? This is that lean manufacturing you've all heard of. Okay, so you're going to stay lean, but what might you do? Well, you might do this, as a matter of fact. You might, because this happens in business all the time. You might say to your people, hey, look, you wanted some time off, go ahead, take it now. Or you wanted that vacation, yeah, please, have at it. You wanted a little extra time off now and fine. And you would perhaps give a lot more time off now, which actually means your supplies would be cutting back a little bit right now. Because what you're thinking is, and what you're telling these folks is, all right, take your time off now, do whatever you need, some personal days, or you need your big vacation times, take it now. Because 3.5 months down the road, we are going to be pumping out product like mad, because that price is going to be up. So expectations for supply is just the opposite. All right, and then technology. 99.999% new technology will increase the supply, okay? I could give you an example of one that didn't, but we don't have the time for it. Perhaps I'll do it in another lecture. But in general, supply technology will increase the supply, okay? We're going to look at technology again when we look at growth theory, okay? It's very important. Technology is the use of knowledge to take whatever we've got right now and apply it in a different, better way that makes it more productive, okay? And sometimes they come up with a new technology that the industry, there's a lag because the industry's not ready for it, can't really take advantage of it yet, okay? And we'll talk about that when we talk about growth theory, okay? But it's interesting. There is that time lag. Sometimes the economy or the society is just not ready to take advantage of that brilliant new technology or new item that we've got. But just remember, new technology will shift supply to the right. Okay? All right. Now, I'm going to mention this, but we're going to look at it again in the weeks to come. When demand shifts to the right or the left, I just want to mention it briefly. When demand shifts, demand will always give us one good thing and one not so good thing, whether it shifts to the right or the left, okay? When supply shifts, supply either gives us two good things or two really not so good things, okay? When supply shifts to the right, it gives us, a booming economy and typically lower prices. Those are the two good things. When its supply curve shifts to the left, that's and we'll talk about this later, that's the nightmare scenario. That's higher prices, we got inflation taking off like mad, and guess what? We're in a recession. It's like the worst of both worlds, okay? All right. Anyway, we will get into that in sessions to come. One more board for you folks. Going to get back to our friends, Adam Smith and David Ricardo, okay? I wanted to talk about supply and demand before I came back to this, but anyway, here we have great example, and again, different books have different items. Some Baker College uses jumbo jets and personal jets. Other books use smartphones and trucks. This is a pretty good one. I mean, here we have, let's say, I didn't put his name up there. Mike, let me get Mike's name up there. We got Deborah and Mike. And we could say, they're the heads of their countries, all right? Now, we look at Deborah's country and we say, well, what do we notice? Well, gosh, she can make, you want to call them 60 million pizzas, fine. 60 million pizzas or 120 million wings, all right? Pretty good. We look at Mike. Well, not so many. He's making 24 million pizzas or 72 million wings, all right? If we took, and this is their production possibility frontier, okay? And if they could, this is where their societies would want them to produce. They want 40 and 40 for Deborah and 18 and 18 for Mike, okay? Now, you take Adam Smith and you say, hey, Adam, take a look at this. What do you think? Well, Adam Smith would look at this and he'd say, okay, well, first you explain to him what a pizza and wings are. Then he'd look at this and he'd say, well, Deborah, she has an absolute advantage with pizzas and wings, okay? She can just make more, all right? Mike, he can't make as many. So what he would say is, look, Mike, you go out and find other products, okay, that you can make, that you're making more of, that you have an absolute advantage in. So he might say, go out and find, and Mike goes out and he finds cheeseburgers and Coney Islands, all right? And he can make a lot of those. They said, Adam Smith would say, okay, good, come on back. Now you trade your cheeseburgers and Coney Islands to Deborah, and she'll trade her pizzas and wings to you, all right? And in that scenario, we have two countries with absolute advantages in items. That is going to benefit, the societies will be better off. But David Ricardo would look at this, and he, after, again, you explain to him what's what, he'd say, well, okay, I see that Deborah can make more of both. Mike can't make as many. But in studying it, what does he notice? He says, well, I noticed this, that if Mike can't make as many, but boy, he sure does seem to do a pretty darn good job making these wings, He can make all these wings, and he's only given up, 24 pizzas to make 72 wings. That's like almost a 3-to-1. He can get 3 wings to 1 pizza. In Debbie's case, she has a 60, 100, she has a 2-to-1 relationship. So 60 pizzas, if she wants to make 120 wings, she has to give up 60 pizzas. So she has a 2-to-1, Mike has a 3-to-1. So what, in effect, what's happening? Well, what's happening is Mike's opportunity cost for making wings. Now he can't, granted, he cannot make as many as Deborah, but his internal cost, his opportunity cost is lower. So what David Ricardo would say, hey, Mike, you don't have an absolute advantage, but you do have a comparative advantage. So he would say, Mike, you concentrate on where your comparative advantage is lowest, all right? You concentrate on the wings, okay? And don't make any pizzas, all right? Now, and he would say to Debbie, you concentrate on pizzas and don't make any wings, okay? And you say, okay, well, what's going on here? What's going to happen? Well, by doing that, if Mike concentrates on making 72 wings, okay, and he ships 47, let's get this right, he ships 47 wings to Debbie, okay? Because remember now, she's not making any wings herself. She's making all pizzas. And you say, okay, now obviously Mike says, well, what's in it for me? Well, what's in it for you? Because he's not making any pizzas. He's going to get 19 pizzas from Debbie. Okay? And say, okay, so is that agreeable? And here's the key. As long as these two people, these two countries, as long as they are reasonable in their exchange, in other words, you don't have one side being piggish about it. Say, no, I want this many pizzas or this many wings. As long as both sides are reasonable and we can fall into that happy area where it makes sense for them to trade, here's what will happen. Okay? So, Debbie didn't make any wings, but she got 47 from Mike. So she is, let me use the right color, she's right here now. All right? Now, Mike didn't make any pizzas, but he got 19 from Debbie. So he's right here now. Okay? All right, now we have to take away the 47 wings from Mike, who had, he was making 72. So take away the 47. So he's back down to 25 wings because we took the 47 out of here, and now we're back to 25. Also, in Debbie's case, she made 60, but she shipped 19 over to Mike. So she's at 41. But by doing this, by being reasonable and concentrating on your lowest opportunity cost, let's take a look at what happens. Well, what happens is this. It puts Mike there, and if I can do it without messing up too much. And it puts both countries outside of their production possibility frontier. And you say, well, wait a minute. I thought that was impossible. The production possibility is that frontier when a country is in autarky, meaning the country does not trade. That's right. It can't go beyond its production possibility frontier when it is by itself. But here's an example of a country concentrating where their opportunity costs are lowest, each one concentrating on where their opportunity costs are lowest, and as long as they're reasonable, they can trade. And what happens? It puts both countries outside of their production possibility frontier, meaning it's giving their societies are better off, giving them more goods and services that they had before, and typically better quality and typically better price, okay? So this is the heart and soul of international trade. Absolute advantage, sure, that's pretty easy to think about. You got an absolute advantage in one thing, somebody's got an absolute advantage in another. Yeah, that works. But it also works if you have a comparative advantage, okay? Now, that is the hallmark, that's the heart and soul of international trade. Second benefit to international trade is that, and this is what didn't happen, unfortunately, before World War II, if you have a trading partner and you're trading back and forth like mad with, okay? And there's some international incident develops between your two countries. Well, what's the likelihood that you're going to go to war? It's very low. Why? Because that's your trading partner. You're going to do everything you can to work it out. You don't want to go to war with your trading partner. Okay, so that's the secondary benefit of robust industrial international trade. Okay? All right. Now, real quick, we'll look at variables and slopes. Again, we talked about slope going up. That means that both are moving together. If we have a downward slope, that means one is going up, the other is going down. This we'll talk about in terms of elasticity in the weeks to come. This is a zero slope, this is infinite slope. But we'll talk about these in the weeks to come. Okay? So that's it for the first video, and it will help you, definitely help you with the first discussion question, and there's going to be absolutely a couple of major essay questions on the first exam that these answers are right there for you. Okay? All right, everybody. You have a good week. I will see you next week. And everybody stay well.